There's a moment that happens to a lot of people, but almost no one talks about it. It's not when you max out your card. It's not when you miss a payment. It's much quieter than that. It's when you realize you've been earning more than you used to, but somehow your life doesn't feel any easier. You're not struggling the way you used to, but you're not moving forward either. Your savings aren't where you thought they'd be. Your stress around money didn't disappear. It just changed shape. And if someone asked you why, you probably wouldn't blame your credit card, because technically you're doing everything right. You pay it off, you stay within your limit, you don't carry debt, you're responsible. But still, something doesn't feel right. And that's the part most people miss. Because the real cost of a credit card isn't what it charges you in interest. It's what it quietly changes in how you live long before you ever notice it. Most people think credit card problems begin when things go wrong, when the balance gets too high, when interest starts stacking up, when payments become stressful. But by the time you reach that point, you're not at the beginning of the problem. You're at the end of it. Because the real shift happened much earlier, before the stress, before the debt, before anything felt wrong. It happened in small, almost invisible moments. Moments where your behavior changed just slightly. Not enough to alarm you, but enough to slowly reshape how you interact with money. And that's what makes this so difficult to notice, because nothing feels extreme. You're not making reckless decisions. You're not out of control. You're just a little more flexible than you used to be, a little less aware, a little more comfortable saying yes. And when those small changes repeat over time, they don't feel like a pattern. They just feel like life.
Let's break this down in a way that actually makes sense, because this isn't really about money at first. It's about psychology. When you pay with cash, there's a very real experience attached to it. You physically hand something over. You feel the loss. You see your money decrease in real time. Even with a debit card, that connection still exists. You swipe, and your balance drops immediately. There's a cause and effect, action, consequence. But with a credit card, that connection gets stretched. You swipe, and nothing changes. At least not in a way your brain registers right away. There's no immediate loss. No immediate feedback, just a delayed consequence that exists somewhere in the future. And that delay matters more than most people realize, because your brain isn't wired to treat delayed consequences the same way it treats immediate ones. If the cost doesn't feel real in the moment, the decision doesn't feel as serious. So what happens? You don't go crazy with spending. You don't suddenly become irresponsible. You just loosen up, slightly. And that's enough. You say yes a little faster. You hesitate a little less. You justify things more easily. Not because you're trying to be careless, but because the system makes it easier to be. And this shows up in ways that feel completely normal. You order food instead of cooking because it's been a long day. You upgrade something small because the difference doesn't seem like much. You keep a subscription because canceling feels like effort. You buy something convenient because it saves time. None of these decisions are bad on their own. In fact, they're all reasonable. But here's where it gets interesting. The problem isn't the decisions themselves. It's how often they happen without you fully noticing. Because when the cost is delayed, the awareness is reduced. And when awareness is reduced, patterns start forming without your permission. Slowly, your baseline shifts. Your normal becomes more expensive, not dramatically, just enough that you don't question it. And because everything still feels manageable, you don't see a reason to adjust. Until one day, something feels off. You're making more money than before, but you don't feel the difference. Your expenses feel heavier, even though nothing major changed. Your savings grow slower than you expected, or not at all. And it's confusing. Because on the surface, everything looks fine. But underneath, your behavior has been drifting, quietly, consistently, in a direction you never consciously chose. Now here's something most people don't realize. This happens even if you never carry a balance, even if you pay your credit card in full every single month. Because again, the trap isn't just about interest, it's about behavior. It's about how easily your spending expands when the friction is removed. Think about this honestly. If you had to pay for everything this month using only cash, would your decisions look exactly the same? Would you order as often? Upgrade as often? Say yes as easily? Probably not, because you would feel every decision, and that feeling would guide you. Not restrict you, just guide you. But when that feeling disappears, your decisions don't stop. They just become less examined. And over time, that creates a gap between what you think you're doing and what's actually happening. And that gap is where your money slowly disappears.
The turning point is when you stop seeing your credit card as just a payment method and start seeing it as something that influences your behavior. Because once you see that, everything becomes clearer. You realize it's not about discipline. It's not about being better with money. It's about understanding the environment you're operating in. Because your environment always shapes your decisions. And a credit card creates an environment where spending feels easier and consequences feel distant. So naturally, your behavior adapts to that environment. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. And once you understand that, you stop blaming yourself, you stop feeling confused, and you start asking better questions. Not, why am I bad with money, but where am I losing awareness? Because that's the real issue, not your ability, not your intentions, just your awareness in small moments. And when you bring awareness back, something shifts. You don't need to restrict everything. You don't need extreme rules. You just start noticing. You catch yourself before automatic decisions happen. You pause slightly more. You think just enough to realign. And that's where control actually comes from. Not from forcing yourself to change, but from seeing clearly enough that change happens naturally. So what does this look like in real life? Not perfect, not strict, just intentional. One simple shift is adding a pause. Before using your credit card, ask yourself, would I still do this if the money left my account immediately? That question reconnects the action with the consequence. It brings back the awareness that the system removes. Another shift is reducing the delay between spending and seeing. Don't wait until the end of the month. Check in more often. Not obsessively, just enough to stay connected. Because when you see your behavior in real time, it's much easier to adjust it. You can also create small boundaries that increase visibility. Not restrictions, just awareness tools. For example, separating essential spending from lifestyle spending. Not to judge yourself, but to understand your patterns. Because once you see your patterns, you don't need someone to tell you what to do. It becomes obvious. And maybe the most important shift is redefining what affordable means. Because just because something fits on your card doesn't mean it fits in your life. Affordability isn't about your limit, it's about your direction. It's about whether that decision moves you closer to the life you want or just makes the moment easier. And when you start thinking that way, everything changes. Not dramatically, just enough.
At the end of the day, this isn't really about credit cards. It's about awareness, about noticing how small, invisible shifts in behavior can shape your entire financial life over time. Because the biggest changes don't come from big decisions. They come from what you repeat without thinking. And the truth is, you don't need to be perfect with money. You don't need to track every detail. You don't need to remove every convenience. You just need to see clearly, to understand what's happening beneath the surface. Because once you do, the confusion fades, the pressure softens, and your decisions start to feel like yours again. Not automatic, not reactive, but intentional. And over time, that's what creates real progress. Not big moves, not sudden changes, just small awareness repeated consistently. So if this made you pause, even for a second, that means something clicked, and that's enough. Because progress doesn't start with perfection. It starts with awareness. If you're into this kind of honest, no-noise thinking about money, drop a like. And in the comments, tell me one thing you've noticed you spend on without even thinking. I read every single one. I'm Mike. This is Wealth Vault, and I'll see you in the next one.